Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get this meeting started and call this meeting to order. Jeff's going to do the roll call first, so listen for your name.
Thank you. And then a reminder for everyone, and then a notice for anybody that's new to the room. We do use the audio system to help record our minutes, so please make sure if you speak during the meeting that you use your microphone. You can touch the little button that looks like a person with sound waves coming out of their mouth, and it will light up red, and that means you're good to go. Thank you. We'll go ahead and get to the roll call. Joy Andrade.
Here.
And our newest board member, Councilmember Amy Beasley.
Yes, sir.
Amanda Bryant is excused. Bruce Davis is excused. Diane Fleet.
Here.
TC Johnson, let me know she might be running just a little bit behind. They've got ACT testing. We'll check back in. Billy Love.
Here.
Chris Primo.
Here.
David Shad.
Here.
Councilmember Liz Sheehan.
Here.
And Lola Stowe.
Here.
All right, we do have a quorum.
So you all received the packets in the mail, I believe, last week via email. So if you could just take a second, and we would like to approve the minutes from the January meeting. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, a second?
Second.
All right, let's do is it a full vote? Board vote only. So do I have all the yays in the room? Yays.
Yay.
Let's do that again. Any yays in the room?
Yay.
Okay. Any abstentions? And any, what's the word? No's. Any no's?
That's right.
Any no's? All right. I'm going to take the yays approve. All right. Public and partner comments for issues on the agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring to the floor? You all are wanting to enjoy the spring day. All right. Okay.
First up, before we get into our committee reports, we wanted to go ahead and give the floor to Emily Elliott and her colleague with Lexington. They're going to give us some updates around renovations that are planned for the transit center. Those plans were recently approved, and Emily is a great partner to us and always wants to consider things like impact to our population. So she wanted to share some information with us, and we thought it was a good idea to try to connect this information with our board and members, because there could be some potential impacts for those that are experiencing homelessness. You're free to take over.
Thank you all so much for having me. I'm Emily Elliott. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development with Lexington. I have spoken with some of or several of you. You all may have heard about this project. It has been ongoing for several years. It was out to bid twice last year, and we officially have a contractor. So while we do not have a final start date, we should have that Friday. It felt important to go ahead and I spoke with Jeff to come and speak with you all regarding tentative plans. We'll be sending out a press release. We'll be including a bunch of partners and sending out more information as we have that available. But just to give you an idea of what our plans are, as we will be renovating the inside of the transit center on Vine Street beginning very soon. We always start with our mission, so I'm just going to run through it really quickly. I would be whipped with noodles if I didn't say we serve people in our community with mobility solutions. So here are some renderings of what our new space would look like. If you have been in that space in the last 15 years, you know that it doesn't look like this. The last update that we had to the inside of the transit center, so the staff-facing side, was in the early 2000s. We frequently have issues with toilets, water fountains. We removed seating during COVID and re-added it in the customer spaces. But this will be a complete renovation of the interior space of Vine Street. So it is an interior gut-to-gut, elevator shaft to elevator shaft, and that is the Vine Street garage. So it will include customer and staff improvement. So better comfort, better ease of use. There will be better considerations for ADA. Currently, if you've been in any of the customer waiting rooms, you know that the floor is not even. So we'll be evening that out. There are a couple of entrances that are uneven as well. So if anyone using a mobility device or even someone with a stroller will have better access to the space. Currently, the customer spaces are separated from any staff. So if something goes wrong in one of the waiting rooms, someone has to alert someone that something is going wrong. And that includes just like someone tripped and fell, are they okay? If you have utilized the customer service staff at the transit center, you know those interactions occur on Vine Street, in traffic, in the middle of buses being parked there. There's idling, there's traffic over top of the space as well as on Vine Street proper. So it's going to increase that ability to communicate with the people who are giving you information. The eyeballs are really important for us as far as increased safety is concerned, because if we can't see what's going on in that space, our reaction time is automatically slower. So it's going to increase safety for staff and for customers as well. We do have prepared a bodega space, so there will be part of the fit in that renovation is that there will be an empty room. It will have to stay empty for a bit. After the construction is complete, we will be applying for an incidental use permit through the Federal Transit Administration, so there will be a bit of a lag, but what we're hoping to do is have some fun programming. So if anybody wants to have fun programming or a literal space for outreach, you can actually come set up inside the space with staff and customers at the same time. So we'll have some stuff planned for that, but the long-term plan is to have some light vending, sort of gas station fare, if you will. You can get a Coke and a bag of Doritos, but also have some food access for folks. So working with some partners, and we've had several discussions. Unfortunately, because of the timing on this, we've never been able to pursue them significantly, but our idea is that if I can send you home with a bag of tomatoes, your life can maybe be a little bit different. If I can send you home with a bag of zucchini in the summer or a head of lettuce. We know there's a food desert downtown, but we don't just want food for someone, we want affordable food for someone. So ideally it would be no cost. It may not be super robust, it's not gonna be a full grocery store, but adding some access for folks. We get a lot of traffic through there between, I think on the weekdays there are about 13,000 trips passing through, so a lot of opportunity for someone to come and grab something on their way home, and you don't have to find extra time to go to a grocery store and have access to fresh foods. So we are slated to begin in April. As I said, we do not have a date currently. We will get a hard date from the contractor on Friday, and we will begin sending out full information. The renovation is expected to last approximately 8 months, and all of our operations will be moved to High Street. Part of the problems with getting this project approved through a contractor was we tried to keep operations on Vine Street under the same space, and that was not feasible for contractors. The risk is too high to have people moving through there with the same frequency, and the buses moving through there to get, a Bobcat in there or have a regular dumpster in there, that sort of thing. So the sidewalk will be closed. You will still be able to access the garage from the ends. You will still be able to access the crosswalks, but the sidewalk there facing Vine Street will be closed, and all of our operations will be moved to High Street. So some of the considerations are that there are limited shelter and seating. We have looked at different ways to accommodate some additional seating and some additional shelter. The ADA access is pretty difficult up there. There's a lot of planters. That's not the same sidewalk that we would build or that we recommend as a city today. So it's not the same sidewalk built out currently. One of the biggest pinch points is that there will be no restrooms available. So neither to the public nor to staff. All of our pass sales will be pushed to either Loudon Avenue online or on board the vehicles. So there are some options for folks. It's just going to be there's going to be a little bit more thought involved, a little bit more processing involved. So if you see on this map, the green rectangles are buses. So at the top of the map where it says high in the left corner, that is the exit of the transit center garage just before the bank there. So the buses will begin staging there, stage back to MLK where there's a crosswalk and a signalized crossing in all 4 directions. And then the remainder of the buses will be back across Martin Luther King again on High Street with the garage right there, up to the other exit of the garage. Currently, we operate 9 buses at a time out of the Vine Street Transit Center. There are a couple of times a week, on Saturdays and Sundays where that's a little bit different. But we already have contingency plans in place for that. That already is functional for us, so that shouldn't be an issue. That is the current plan, though. And so right now, the only shelter is there by if you look in the bottom right corner, the last bus, the bus is in front of the shelter's in front of the second to last vehicle there. And it is not being removed or modified in any way. So I know a lot of providers, transportation is a barrier, getting passes is a barrier, all of these things. So here's a quick breakdown of how folks will be able to, and what type of payment, they will be able to purchase passes. So on every single vehicle, every single day, this is not new, you can buy a single ride, which is just a one-way, or a day pass, which is unlimited rides for that day. You will be able to buy passes in person at Loudon with cash or card, any pass that's on this menu. Online, all of these passes are available as well, and we can mail them or they can be picked up in person, but that will also be at Loudon. So this may create some barriers for folks. Our plan is to have some additional options available. We're exploring with our point of sale system what it can actually do. So there should be some additional options, and we're working with our board to understand how to provide additional discounts based on this. The other really important thing that I just want to make sure that I point out is that I am aware that the transit center is a waypoint for several people during the day between time of services ending and beginning, and when there are gaps in services on the weekends. There is not going to be anywhere for them to land. There's not going to be a restroom to clean up in. There's not going to be a place to sit with any frequency. So one of the limitations is that our staff are also going to be significantly inconvenienced by this. So typically they would be going to the bathroom, having a break, putting food in a refrigerator, that sort of thing. So I want to be as supportive and helpful as possible and give options to the community and how we can help support people and not just displace folks who typically spend some time here. But also knowing that I cannot offer a shuttle from X to Y, right? I can absolutely offer resources. I can make sure that our folks are well informed and they can give people the right information that they need. But we are going to be pretty overextended as well as far as just our basic operations are concerned. Otherwise, I would have been like, hey, guess what? We're going to have this cool shuttle coming along. But we're going to be pretty overextended, especially in those first couple months when it's going to be a little bit wild. So I just, if you guys have ideas, questions, comments, concerns, here is my contact information. I have some cards as well. I'm happy to chat and understand your questions, concerns, all of those sorts of things. That is my direct line that goes to my office, which is totally fine. It's also on my cards. But feel free to call, reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions, go over thoughts, concerns, ideas, questions, but we just wanted to sort of get this information out to you so that you can have considerations for the folks that you're serving that also utilize our services, and just know that we're open to ideas, we're supportive to breaking down barriers, but we're working through a challenging logistical puzzle right now, and more than happy to work together to figure this out.
Are there questions or comments for Emily?
Small comment. I'm really interested in that bodega space. That's a really cool idea. So, thank you.
With that in mind, I know that, obviously a lot of our providers are going to have capacity constraints and may not be able to volunteer a lot of time, but I would like to look and see how moving forward we might be able to utilize some of that space and help connect people, help navigate resources. We'll be very happy for my office to help kind of bring everybody together and communicating about that as it comes online. Main reasons we kind of wanted this information to come to you is because obviously it's going to take some education from our frontline staff who work with folks every day, inform them of these changes so they know where to access the bus, so that they know about potential limitations on purchasing. As Emily mentioned, you can always use cash to purchase on board. So I think we just need to kind of coach in advance. But also thinking through things like as we approach summer, we typically would have a need to try to do things like get people to shaded spaces during extreme weather. So we just might need to be considerate in how we would make adjustments to things like operating hours of services in light of this gap, so we can make sure that people still have access to resources that they need. Can you use your mic?
Okay, I
Thank
do
you.
have a question. Are they still gonna do the students' success cards?
Yes, we will still be providing student success cards. We're still collaborating with the library on that program. We will also still be participating in rides to shelter for extreme heat as well. This is just sort of an extra layer in that if someone leaves a service and has a gap until they're eligible for their next service, that, I never want to get the call that someone is sitting there and has been like roasted in the sun and comes in sunburn and needs medical attention. So the only change is really the location of the operations downtown. The one other piece that is going to be difficult is we're asking people to be considerate of our staff who may need to stop en route and use the restroom. So they are going to be stopping en route to use the restroom because they don't have restroom access either.
The next time you think you're having a bad work day, just think about not having access to a bathroom.
We've identified the.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great question. So currently there is a gendered restroom in each of the shelters, the waiting rooms downtown. Post-construction, there will be a single waiting room, and so customer service interactions will be inside. The customer service staff will face that waiting room, and then sort of there's a hallway between the waiting room and the bodega. There will be 3 non-gendered public restrooms, as well as one of those will be a family restroom. So it'll have like the appropriate family items that are needed in there. And then one of the lessons learned is that you can break anything. So we are looking at more durable materials so that we have better uptime with the restrooms as well.
Any other questions?
Sort of unrelated, but since you're here, I wanted to ask, what is the best way to advocate for some of the bus stops to have like a shelter on top or additional routes? How does one go about that?
You can send me an email or
Okay.
email info@Lextrain.
Okay.
That goes to our planning team. And just for a little bit of background, some of that is going to involve the amount of ridership, the number of routes that serve that stop. Some of the other considerations that we look at are connected sidewalks, boarding pads, if there's something already there or not, and then if there's the need for acquisition of private space, those sorts of things.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. If there's no other questions for Emily, just know that we'll continue to communicate offline and follow up with our providers as needed with any updates, obviously distributing anything relevant through our mailing list. Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate you sharing that information.
So next we'll move to committee reports, and the first one I have is Data and Systems Integration Committee, which is with Joy.
This will be very short. Our meeting on February 5th was canceled. However, our next meeting will be on April 2nd, 1:30 to 3 at the Don Ball Campus Center.
Definitely anticipate a full agenda since we missed a meeting.
Next up is Program Performance and Evaluation Committee, and that is with Liz.
Hi, everyone. We met for our committee on February 19th at 1:30, and our first item on the agenda was to approve the meeting minutes from the December 11th, 2024 meeting. Sorry, I'm having a little moment here where I'm like, I don't even remember this meeting. I've had so many. I have all my notes here, but I'm like,
We were also virtual.
okay, that's what it must have been then. I'm like, I don't remember being at the Don Ball Campus Center. Okay. We were virtual. So we had the Community Action Council present for the emergency family housing with the Extended Social Resource Grant. We had some good conversation for this particular presentation. They didn't have any exits due to rule violations, so we wanted to applaud that. We also had some conversation about the changes in the federal policies around housing first policies and requirements to work. So we are having to maybe proactively start coming up with strategies to help get clients connected with employment. The next two presentations, now I'm remembering the virtualness of this, were from the Lexington Fayette Urban County Housing Authority program. They presented on their Shelter Plus Care Permanent Supportive Housing Program, which is a COC program, and the Supportive Housing Grant Permanent Supportive Housing COC program. That's the collaboration with Natalie's Sisters. So they have had a little bit of some staffing issues, so the presentations were a little bit short, so they were going to circle back around to us to get us some updated information on some of their income measures and their exits to permanent housing. Then the next presentation that we had was from the New Life Day Center. This is an extended social resources grant. We had a great conversation about the work that they're doing. They did talk about having conversations about expanding the van program that they operate. And then we had an extensive conversation about the storage that they provide for clients and how that might also be expanded and what opportunities there might be there for that. We did not have any other public comments for the group, and our next meeting is April 16th, 2025 at 1:30 at the Don Ball Campus Center, assuming we don't go virtual. At that meeting, we will have the Community Action Council again for crisis and housing support for youth, their rapid rehousing program, Project Independence, which is also a rapid rehousing program. We'll hear from Greenhouse 17 for their emergency shelter and New Vista for their permanent supportive housing program. And then we adjourned.
If we get snow in April, I'm going to be mad.
We'll be coming for more winter weather money. Yeah, yes. Does anybody have any questions for Liz at all? Okay, nope. So the next, we're going to go to Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee with David Schabb.
All right. Best I can remember, we were in person. We met on February 26th at the Don Ball Campus Center. We approved the minutes from the prior meeting, December 18th meeting. Jeff Herron did a presentation regarding the 1915 RISE initiative, which is a state plan amendment that allows communities to identify targets for the home and community-based waiver program. I stumble over that. That's hard to say. And this would allow services, including like tenancy services, helping people find housing, helping people stay in housing. It would allow for Medicaid billing for that underneath the waiver program. So these plans are going to be offered statewide, and there we discussed some of the supports and services that would be included. CMS is currently reviewing the submission, and program development is underway. Is that, Jeff, do you remember, is that supposed to be like next fiscal year?
They said originally that it could start as early as July.
Okay.
I think the kind of tone of the meeting was that we're all unsure if that timeline will stick in light of everything going on in our country right now.
Right. So who knows what Medicaid looks like, right? So as an aside, I did have a conversation with Jason Bagley of the Department of Behavioral Health about this, and he said that these are, they're trying to roll out the old SMI waivers, so it's very similar to that process if you're familiar with that. But agencies, providers would have to get approved and able to bill through Medicaid to be able to provide these services. And again, tenancy support services, including pre-tenancy and tenancy sustaining services, would be approved under this. Anything else you want to add to that, Jeff?
No, I was going to loop back around to the state and share some of the questions that came up during the conversation and just try to get a working group together. The first meeting that they had with us, we really just wanted to meet with them, my internal staff, so that we could really understand their plan. But now that we have a little bit more information, we're hoping to bring some of our providers together so we can follow up on that.
Next up on that agenda, Marissa reviewed the COC standards for rapid rehousing, and committee voted to accept those those standards, and we will need a vote from the board to approve that. Anything you want to add to that, Marissa? And not many changes, right? So, and that's in your packet, but it was pretty much the same. And then Jeff talked about the Housing Flex Fund, which will be managed by OHPI to provide a flexible source of funding to assist participants in obtaining and maintaining long-term stable housing. We outlined the roles and responsibilities of OHPI and the Housing Flex Funding Access Point agencies. Talked about the criteria for participants to be able to qualify, and reviewed some of the allowable expenses under the fund, including move-in assistance, prevention, rental assistance, relocation assistance, as well as other expenses that may be approved. There will be an annual assistance limit of $2,000 for single adults and $3,000 for households with minor children, and discussed application criteria and the documentation required for this process. So, and our next meeting will be April 23rd, 1:30 at the Don Ball Campus Center. And we need an approval for the rapid rehousing standards.
This would be a board vote. We would need a motion and a second. TC gave us a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Joy? All right. Any further discussion on that item? All board members in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that motion passes.
Oppose, that was the word. No. Okay, all right. So the next portion of this is the Jeff Herron Show, so he'll take on the next part. So we will start with the encampment report.
All right. The report was in your packet. We had 3 cleanups that were performed since the time that we last met. Location number 1 was located off of West New Circle Road. This is going to be up by a water quality building. It also involves railroad property and private property. A notice initially came to us on October 3rd from police. You can see quite a few attempts from outreach at engagement. I believe I did make a note here somewhere that there was up to 7 unique individuals at that location, but it varied how many individuals were there at the time of each contact. Unfortunately, only one individual accepted services, and he actually was arrested prior to the time of the cleanup being performed. So outreach is going to make attempts to follow up with that individual. They distributed basic needs items and harm reduction supplies, trying to make multiple attempts at engagement. Initial notice was posted on November 13th, with a final notice posted on December 11th. Cleaning was performed on December 16th. As you can see, this is a really large cost of an encampment cleanup, probably one of the most significant in my time in this role, at $19,150. This is, something that I think had been there for quite a while, a lot of accumulation of items, and it's definitely going to be an outlier in our data. So you'll see when we get to the summary reports, I did put asterisks next to the average cost per cleanup. This would obviously skew an average, and with only 3 encampments, we also can't really use a median as a more effective measure. Location number 2 was an abandoned camp off of Old Frankfort Pike, reported to us on February 6th by police. A couple of attempts were made, one at initial notification, and then again prior to scheduled removal. Since there were no signs of activity or active encampment, we did not post notice at this location. Cleanup was performed on February 26th. This was a pretty low cost of $550. Location number 3 was off of Cambridge Drive. This was notified to us on February 3rd by code enforcement. Environmental Services had been completing unrelated work in the area and came upon an individual there. Outreach made contact the next day. The individual declined services, but they did distribute some items and make a few follow-up contacts. Still saw evidence on February 7th of an individual being there. By the time they had next contact on February 11th, it looked like that resident had relocated. They still went ahead and followed up prior to that removal, final notice being posted on February 24th. The cost of that cleanup performed on February 28th was $1,480. So altogether, there were 3 cleanups within this period of total cost of $21,180, and the average being skewed, but at $7,060. One of those camps had no contact and no signs of active encampment. None of those were included in our emphasis areas. Contact was made with individuals at 2 locations. Again, unfortunately, most of them declining and voluntarily relocating. That's going to bring our total number of cleanups for the year up to 14, and our cost for this fiscal year to just under $37,000. So we are quickly approaching what our total for all cleanups last fiscal year would have been. Potentially, we might see that surpass last year's amount. That would be one of the reasons why my office is pursuing a new position this year to try to help coordinate our response to encampments with a dedicated staff that can do additional follow-up, spend a little bit more time in the field, and coordinate with our outreach teams. So we are hopeful that that will help us have some better outcomes and make sure that we have a consistent presence in the field to try to pursue engagement. Any questions about the encampment report? Yeah.
For the averages, for the average cost per cleanup for the fiscal year, how much did it go up with that 19,000? Do you know?
Probably about 1,000 or so. It was prior, it was closer to 1,500 as an average.
Would it be okay to include an average cost per cleanup without that one in there and just give us both numbers?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question, and it's more of like, I guess, a process question. So when they do the cleanup, do you know how much it would cost before they do the cleanup, or after? Do they give you like a line list number? Like, you know, are there certain numbers given to certain items cleaned up, or, you know, or is it assessed as like a whole?
Most of the time I receive the information after the fact, reach out to the division and get a invoicing spreadsheet that would track anything related to encampments. Sometimes staff will tell me when a bid is awarded to someone what the anticipated cost will be, and I get kind of general descriptions. It might reference things like the number of bags of trash that were collected. Sometimes it might have reference to like pounds of debris that were removed, but it's not necessarily a high level of detail. And then I don't know that it's super consistent in terms of being able to break it down to a really granular kind of level.
Okay, that was my question, whether or not it was consistent, because, like, what if they just have a bad day? Like, you know? But, yeah, I was just curious.
Usually it's going to be tied to just the volume of what's being cleaned up. I want to say something like the first location, I would say it was probably over 55 bags of trash. So, other questions? All right, well then moving into the director's report, we'll start with a budget update. We have, as of this board meeting, should be the last time that we report on our fiscal year 24 ARPA funds. The Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund for that fiscal year had rolled onto ARPA funding. We currently have just the project with Community Action Council for winter expansion of emergency family housing. Right now it shows all of that as a balance. We did get the first invoice processed and are working through additional. There was just a payroll issue that we had to get corrected with the documentation, but that will be the last project funded out of fiscal year 24 ARPA funds. Also have included our general fund dollars. We received an additional $750,000 in fiscal year 24 to go ahead and effectively make the increase to our fund effective in that year. We had also received additional funds that year for the feasibility study for the shelter feasibility study. So right now there is an unallocated balance of $744,000 remaining on fiscal year 24. For fiscal year 25, we received $1.4 million, which was effectively double what we had been receiving in previous years. At the current time of this spreadsheet, you're going to see $661,155 remaining. There would additionally be 2 RFPs that closed on February 28th that the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee is going to be making funding decisions on following this meeting. So that should significantly decrease these balances. And we just need to continue to kind of catch up to this new level of funding. Good problem to have in our field, but definitely anticipate additional RFPs coming from us in the very near future. Also included, even though it is technically not part of the Innovative and Sustainable Solutions Fund, the money that was set aside from the general fund for winter response. We have spent a significant amount of this money. Right now, we are looking to be able to close out contracts with our hotel vendors with a little bit of a cushion to cover damages. We also are going to have a board vote on 2 items related to winter response. The first of which is funding that this office gave to the Catholic Action Center. As you know, we definitely had a more severe winter than we had last year. And one of the pitfalls of having a motel-based shelter as opposed to a site-based option like last year's temporary shelter with the Hope Center is that we don't have a 24/7 drop-in center that can just you can't access that shelter at 2 a.m. We have to have somebody check you into a hotel. We have to have a room available. There's definitely some challenges in being able to operate overflow with this model. Catholic Action Center operated 2 different stints in hotel to try to help meet that gap. The first of which would have been January 3rd all the way through January 27th. Even though we only had a couple of storms through that period, we also had extreme cold temperatures, as you recall, that lasted for several weeks and definitely would have proven a risk of harm to individuals. For that stay, we went ahead and provided them with 2 payments towards overall cost, one of $39,900 and one for $25,000. We also covered a portion of their meal expenses. We used our winter shelter program vendor and went ahead and provided approximately 2 weeks of meals for the approximately 200 persons that they had in hotel, and that was $38,771. We, of course, did not have that be the last of winter. And we saw an additional spell of bad weather in February between February 15th and February 23rd. They operated additional motel with about 40 persons maintained that time around, and my office contributed $10,000. So overall, we contributed $113,671.20. I do have some other sources of funding that I could look at, but wanted to bring this to the board since we currently have a surplus of funds and see if this might be something that we'd want to cover with innovative and sustainable solutions dollars. That will be something that I would be asking for a motion on. Additionally, we'll have one other voting item, talking with Community Action Council and their winter family shelter expansion. Through March 1st, they have already significantly exceeded their projected budget for hotel expenses. Presently, those expenses total $110,789. We had originally awarded for that program an amount of $122,823. Working with Marty, I projected based on what their average costs were for January, which would have been our period of most extreme weather. And we project that that program is going to close out funding definitely above the amount that was budgeted. We presently think that we will probably need to increase their funding to $177,804. So before moving on to my next item, I'll go ahead and take care of these votes. First, for the Catholic Action Center operation of Overflow Shelter, just want to point out that they were the only provider that would have had the ability to scale up that quickly, and that these costs definitely are much less significant than if LFUCG had to directly scale up its rooms, security, meals, staffing. So this was definitely something that we felt important to go ahead and support. And like I said, leave it to your discretion as to how we would choose to fund this. Would there be a motion from a board member to apply this to innovative and sustainable solutions funding? Okay, motion from Liz Sheehan. Is there a second?
Second.
There were several seconds, but I saw Billy's mouth moving, so. All right. Board members, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. And next, for Community Action Council, I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly tell you the exact amount of additional funding. We could choose to increase just to barely cover the projected cost if we want to go ahead and install a small buffer so that I don't have to run this through council multiple times. We would need to go ahead and fund them an additional amount of $54,981.37. Would there be a motion?
So moved.
Okay. TC gave us a motion. Is there a second? All right. All board members in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes, and I thank you also for committing to just a little bit of buffer so that, again, we can only do one amendment with them and not have to bring that item back to you multiple times. In general, just a minor update on shelter overall. We have been conducting, through my office, case conferencing meeting with all of our supportive service providers, helping them identify potential pathways to permanent housing for all of the participants. We are also offering some financial assistance. I may potentially, if that exceeds an amount of money that I have of non-board controlled funds, may bring some of those expenses to the board at the next meeting. Right now, we've not seen a high amount of financial assistance request. We do have a number of individuals that have achieved permanent housing, but this is, again, a little bit of a challenge with the model that we're using this year. We don't have a dedicated service space that we can really easily connect with people. It's a lot of one-on-one one-on-one work between providers and individuals, trying to make contact with them at their room. We don't have, kind of the structure that we had at the Hope Village last year. So we are hopeful that we'll see a lot more of those requests in the coming weeks, and in the winter, for several people, a lot more positive than they began. We have been averaging probably over 170 persons every night. Another challenge to this model is keeping people in motel. When there is a private property owner that may have concerns about behaviors that people engage in, rather than a service provider operating the program, there's definitely going to be less flexibility. So one of the things that we've seen is that our average capacity has been down a little bit because we have people cycle out, then we have to replace new people, and that takes a little bit of time to turn over rooms. But we'll provide a more full update on winter response at next meeting, including outcomes of our various projects. At this time, would there be any winter-related questions?
Is it too soon to ask about next year, what it might look like?
So a little bit. It's not too soon to be thinking about it at all. I essentially plan that, like, this ends April 1st, probably April 2nd. I will be beginning my planning for next year. We are still waiting for the official results of our shelter feasibility study. Saw an initial draft of that this week. We are hoping that we'll be able to present that this summer. But it's going to be really challenging for us to take that information and translate that into expanding permanent shelter quickly. So I anticipate we'll be looking at least one more year of interim solutions. So what we'll be doing April 2nd is beginning to look at what we can potentially facilitate. Would like to see an option different than what we had this year. Some of the problems that I think that we ran into, first of all, my office was the direct operator of shelter, in the sense that we held all the contracts with all of the vendors. We had to develop a process for receiving applications, reviewing and prioritizing applications, making referrals, following up with hotels on issues, all the invoicing that comes along with all of that. As a 3-person staff that already has a lot to do, that was not ideal. The other thing is we have amazing partners who stepped up to the plate when I was looking for Plan B and agreed to help provide supportive services. But that's a strain on everybody's capacity. We did provide some funding to try to offset that, but it's not easy for providers to scale up staffing quickly and to do it temporarily. So I know it's been a strain for a lot of our providers, even those that might not be serving a lot of clients, definitely had additional demands on their time. And I think that's going to show in some of the outcomes that we have this year versus last year. So I definitely hope that we can find a solution next year that doesn't overly tax this office and our existing supportive service providers, that we would have a solution that really has supplemental resources, especially for case management, to be able to really engage people, and hopefully a little bit more stability. That in and out of hotel is pretty frequent. We've, when possible, using 2 hotel vendors, tried to place somebody at our other hotel if there was an issue at one property. There's unfortunately been some people that have had issues that have been so severe that we were not comfortable making an additional placement, or had activity transpire at both properties that got them restricted from the program.
Yeah, I know that it was also a problem for us at the hospital. It was not accessible for hospital discharges, so I do feel like we really probably kind of taxed the other surrounding shelters probably more than we could have, just because there was no pathway for anybody coming out of a hospital to access the program. So it made our jobs a little harder, as it did yours, I know.
I'm sure it did. You know, we tried to be helpful if we were directly in communication about a situation, but if we, you know, didn't have a room available to schedule a check-in that particular day, the
Right.
nature of hospital discharges being kind of quick was a real challenge. And I know that we had to also try to make sure that we consistently communicated with other shelters like Salvation Army and try to send out information to our providers so that they knew where beds were available across our system and try to use everything as strategically as possible.
Is there like, I think in Louisville, isn't Wayside like an old motel that they've converted into a shelter? Like, I don't know if that would be an option for any of this, if we're using motels, hotels anyways. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely that is, you know, a model that is being looked at as we complete our shelter feasibility study. We're looking at various different models. You know, eventually we would really like to have something more along the lines of a homeless resource campus. But we're also looking at what kinds of things might be able to be executed quickly or potentially on an interim basis.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Chris, this thing doesn't work. Is that one work? Yep, all right. Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah. To that, I would just want to add a couple of things.
Check one, two.
We will continue doing this until Lexington adds shelter beds. It will be 100% necessary until that day comes. So in terms of the question of will we do it next year, yeah, absolutely. Now, what will it look like? You've had those conversations about whether the model needs to be adjusted. I think every year we try something new that still doesn't work, basically, because what we're trying to do is put a Band-Aid on our lack of shelter beds. Once the study comes out and it's presented to council, it becomes a political conversation. I'm looking at our two council board members. It's out of our hands. It's out of this group's hands. They need to hear from you all. I'm just going to tell you right now, they're not hearing enough from you all about this need. They're not. And they need to hear from the industry that this is a problem. If you want support, if you want council support, administration support, financing, all that kind of stuff, they need to hear from other people than me and Jeff that this is a need and a problem. Because that's critical, and this is, I don't have to tell you all, this is extraordinarily difficult to resolve. There is not a quarter acre of land in the city of Lexington where you could build a shelter and someone wouldn't want to set the place on fire. Trust me, we've looked. Multiple years we've looked. Jeff and I have scoured this entire county with realtors looking for usable land. And there's nothing available that isn't going to make someone angry. So it's going to take a lot of courage, political courage, effort, money, all those things. And just to be realistic and honest with everyone, if we voted, let's say next Thursday the council voted 100%, here's $50 million, go build a new shelter, you're still 2 years away, maybe 3, by the time you do acquisition, construction, and all that. So all that to say, we need to do more to work hard on this issue and press the issue. And we also need to be realistic that we got 2 or 3 more years of this hotel thing left. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I'd like to add to what Charlie is saying on the end of our McKinney-Vento families. It has been this year has tremendously increased. We already are at like 998, close to 1,000 already of our students and their families that are homeless. And I know that has been a real huge challenge for our department, trying to find housing that's affordable. And so, just working with the Goodwill, the Hands Up for Housing program, and then working with Jenny and them, it's still not enough. And so I totally agree that we've got to get more messages out. And I think, go ahead, use the kids, like, hey, we have our children that are out there homeless, and the families are struggling because they can't find housing that they can afford. So
I would add that for advocacy to council, In the past, we have done some coordinated campaigns for our group, and I think like timing it all at once is really helpful when it comes to approaching council and feeling the pressure. So what I would recommend is that we figure out when the president, like, get the finalized confirmation of when it's going to be presented from council, and then kind of walk that back a week so that we can have a coordinated contact time for the group. So then it's all kind of coming around the same time as the presentation, potentially around the same time as when we're starting all of our budget conversations from the council side, so that we really are strategic about when we're reaching out.
I actually think that would be a great item for us to raise in the next advocacy committee meeting. David, if you're agreeable with that, I would love for us to take a look at that. Similar to when we had the source of income discrimination ban on the floor, the COC committed a formal letter of support. Numerous providers scheduled time with council members, were present outside the government center when the day of the vote came, attended and made public comment at meetings. I definitely agree that that kind of coordinated support and communication is vital. To TC's point, working with Marty and his team, we originally projected a much lower number of families. At present, I think we have probably around 19 families that are in their program, necessitating us to come back for those additional funds. They've done a great job of trying to move people to housing or other shelter quickly, but it's just, we're seeing a lot of people struggling with the current housing market, and it's not going to improve tomorrow. So we really do need your support. And as Charlie mentioned, it can't just be from us. If we do things like successfully get through a season and people don't hear about the problems, the challenges, the next year they're going to assume that what we did previously was just fine, and that that's what we need to keep doing. So I need your support.
Yeah, I would add, you all can do that as a group. You can do advocacy. I'm sure everyone knows the parks tax that was just voted on. That was initiated by the Parks Advisory Board, a LFUCG committee just like this. The staff can't do it. Jeff and I can't do it, but you all can do that if that's something you choose. To be clear, I'm not advocating for a tax for homelessness. Just want to make sure that's on the record since we're recording. Thank you.
That would look really good in the Lexington Herald tomorrow, wouldn't it?
Can we advocate for that?
At which point, David, I would say it was nice working with you.
I do want to go ahead and also give a shout out to Charlie's office and working with the Goodwill Center. We have already placed, and I haven't looked at our recent numbers, but the last time I looked at it, we had actually placed 82 families with the Hands Off of Housing program, and at least half of those have already been placed in housing, and it's sustainable. So we have not, knock on wood, had no evictions, and our families have been able to maintain it. And it's because we're backing it up with some support and helping our families, educating our families with budgeting and that follow-up and that whole thing. So it's working well. And our students are starting to those particular students are now not truant. So they're able to go to school. We're providing transportation for those students. So that is truly working. And I just want to give hats off to Charlie for his initiative in helping with Goodwill and helping with that program. So.
All right. I'm going to give you one other really positive, warm and fuzzy update. So there's been a lot of concern amongst individuals in our field, as I'm sure in other fields as well, about potential impacts at the federal level to the work that we do locally. A couple of things that we wanted specifically for this board to be aware of, because it could impact things like our work and our funding in the future. Unfortunately, until today, I didn't get a positive update on this. We have not yet seen programs that were awarded funding under the fiscal year 24 Continuum of Care program competition go under contract. We made an announcement about those awards back in January, and we were excited that it was our highest ever award of $2.55 million. We received as a community 99.5% of our ask. So definitely we were pleased with that news. Not as pleased when we did not see those programs receiving renewal agreements. Community Action Council was the first project to have the earliest start date in the year of March 1st. When March 1st came, there was still no concrete plan as to when they might have an award. It does look like HUD has taken a measure to go ahead and work with the programs that have early start dates in the calendar year, considering that there could be a federal government shutdown, and move forward with getting those programs under agreement. Marty was in communication with the field office, and LFUCG's grants division has heard about environmental reviews for those projects. So definitely we have a kind of short reprieve of being concerned about having to immediately suspend those programs or anybody being immediately displaced. But I don't know that we're out of the woods yet. So definitely we may need to look at additional advocacy campaigns to do things like reach out to your representatives about supporting that funding be followed through on. The other update in this area is going to be around changes with HUD. So a concrete update is that HUD has canceled its technical assistance contracts with outside vendors. The only vendor that we're presently aware of that we've worked with that is still operating would be ABT, who helps us with our LSA and point-in-time count and HIC submissions. Presumably it would be because those are still kind of underway. System performance measure submission was supposed to open last month, February 3rd. Still is not open. There's a giant banner across the top of HDX that just says that it's been delayed at the request of HUD, and there's been no definitive timeline given to us. We conducted our point-in-time count in the end of January. Usually we submit that information around April. That has not opened for us to enter any information into HDX yet. So we're definitely seeing signs of delays. We've been encouraged by the local field office that any projects that would have an annual performance report due soon, attempt to get that submitted prior to this Friday, if feasible, so that they can ensure that there's actually somebody in the office to review those reports. The other concern is there's been a lot of rumors regarding layoffs and staffing cuts at HUD. That could be as much as 50%, and within certain areas of HUD, it could be higher. The area that we would fall under could have as much as 84% of staff cut. So that would definitely impact us in several ways. It would mean things like the current concern that we have around agreements being received timely and executed. If a program does not have an agreement in place that ensures that they can charge those expenses, we're going to have organizations that are going to have to consider things like the level of cash flow that they have, what their credit is, what amount of funds that they're comfortable expensing without a guarantee of reimbursement. We have a lot of organizations that are small. We have organizations that are very heavily funded through federal grants that might not have to consider just covering cost of a housing program, but potentially other areas of operation as well. Additionally, it means potential delays in reimbursements, and obviously a decrease to things like technical assistance that help us to navigate issues, concerns, receive answers on questions about regulation and compliance. So we will continue to keep you updated. When we have more concrete information in any of these areas, we'll definitely be keeping some running updates in advocacy committee and here at our board meetings, but potentially may need to reach out with some email blasts asking for some certain steps to be taken. Because again, this would have a significant impact to us. We have, again, $2.55 million in funding through this program. And the majority of that is directly supporting housing projects. So back on January 27th, when I was at home with the flu and I got my phone blowing up with updates about the federal funding freeze, that was a real concern that we were on the 27th of a given month, and I was worried about whether we'd be able to pay rent on the 1st. So this is the kind of situation that we're concerned about. Just want you to be aware of as a board and as an office that helps coordinate this system. There's potential that we may need to come together and have some difficult conversations about how we can best support our partners and those that we serve to avoid disruption to those that do have access to housing and support. Not sure how much I can answer, but I will attempt if there's any questions. Clearly really lifted the mood. It was sarcasm. Not that tone deaf. If there's not any questions, our next meeting would be here in this room, May 14th. We are lucky enough to get all of our meetings scheduled in this room this year, so definitely plan on seeing us here. Would there be any other announcements or public sharing for issues not on the agenda?
Yes, we're doing Table Talk next Friday, and it's going to be at the Davis Workforce Center down on Oliver Way and Dorota, and it'll be from 9 to 12. Welcome to have you come.
Anybody else? Surely somebody has some good news that they can share.
I'll share some good, not good news. You know, our new transitional housing building we thought would be open this week, and it's not. But the good news is that we're probably still looking at probably the end of March, 1st of April for getting occupancy. There may be a delay with some like outside work that won't affect that. So hopefully beginning of April, at least early April, we'll be able to start moving people in, which will at least open up some shelter beds that as we're moving veterans out of there. So again, for those of you who don't know, we have a 2-story construction that's right in front of our emergency shelter. First floor is for veterans that are currently in our transitional housing program or grant per diem program, which is currently inside of the shelter. And then the second floor will be transitional housing for people who are at the shelter working on housing or, you know, who go from the shelter and want to get into like IOP or something like that, but don't have anywhere to stay. So just transitional, we'll be working with them on providing case management and also, you know, doing some life skill groups and things like that, just trying to increase the amount of services that we're providing for that group. So we will be doing an open house ribbon cutting type thing. Now it's probably going to be in May, but we'll send invites out to this group. So
We'll be happy to share that. It's a gorgeous addition. Got to tour that with Commissioner Lanter and the mayor a couple weeks ago. Think it's going to be a really great opportunity for people to have some transitional living space.
Jeff, we do have a one-day research conference happening at Eastern State next month on April 24th. It's I can't remember what prize, it's PRISE, I cannot remember what all that stands for. But I can definitely send out some information about that soon if people are interested. It's, you know, primarily kind of the research that's happening at Eastern State, the empath unit, I think some things will be shared. I think there'll be some interesting keynote speakers and that kind of, I think there'll be a Zoom option perhaps and in person, so I can send that out.
Yeah,
soon.
we'd love to share that. Anybody else? Yeah.
Hi, Amy, with Sexual Violence Resource Center of the Bluegrass. So next month is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. Gosh, I've got a frog suddenly. So we have a lot of wonderful opportunities coming up. I can send that out to the group. Some fundraisers, some awareness campaigns, and yeah, we can send out the calendar. Thanks.
Thank you. Other announcements? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Bruce is not with us today, so it's going to have to be somebody else.
So moved.
Thank you, TC.
Oh, second, yeah.